Hi everyone, welcome to part two of Antichrist Analysed, the Man of Sin video. And today we're actually going to be looking at the identity of the Man of Sin. So I'm going to present to you 5 possibilities that could help us identify the Man of Sin. We do need to keep in mind that Paul said there were 5 sequence of events that would happen within the sort of timeline of the revelation of the Man of Sin. The appearance of the rebellion, the man of lawlessness, the removal of the restrainer, the destruction of the lawless one, and finally the rise of delusion. These sequence of events have to happen before the end could finally come. Alright, something else that is very much up for debate is that in verse 6 we talk about this restraining power, something that is restraining this person from being revealed. A lot of people interpret that as perhaps the principle of law and order in the world, that in the world, we do have a set of established laws and principles and rules that we have to live by, whether they come under God's guidance or not. Really, there is a law and order. So the suggestion is that if that were to be removed and then all chaos would kick in, then the man of sin would be revealed. So it's quite uncertain to find out what exactly is the restraining power. Paul also mentions the apostasy or the rebellion that would take place before the man of sin is revealed. So the question to ask ourselves in these suggestions that I'm going to present is, would that be considered a rebellion that's a big deal? Would that rebellion go deep enough to convince us that yes, this is the man of sin? So keep that in your mind as we go through these suggestions now. Number 1, the man of sin could be the Antichrist. This is without a doubt the most popular view today. Whenever you type in on any internet search, be it Google, Got Questions, whatever it may be, it always comes up that the man of sin refers to some future Antichrist walking into a third temple. Well, we've already seen that there are some theological problems with this idea of a third temple, and already with the videos that I've shared, there is no evidence that the New Testament is talking about a third temple. It's talking about either the Christian church, the first century Christian church, being the temple of God, or it's talking about the temple of God in heaven, or God being the temple. And in terms of an antichrist, I mean, I'll make a video on this soon, but, in the letters of 1 John, the antichrist there does not refer to one individual person. Even in the text it says, now there are many antichrists. So biblically, it is not correct to say that there is just one antichrist only in the future. The term just means against Christ, but what's happened in the Christian interpretive tradition, that this idea has developed that there will be some future Antichrist who will walk into the temple and say that he's God. But I would want to say that when you read through the text, that is not supported or sustained in the Bible. Something else that got me thinking when you read the text, we often think of the Antichrist or any sort of futuristic dictator person to be a person who will really wage war on the world and will create, perhaps using the modern age of nuclear destruction and all that kind of stuff. But when you read the text, it basically talks about this man of sin only comes to deceive people and lead people astray. I mean, through the working of Satan, he uses his power to create signs, lying wonders, and every kind of wicked deception for all those who are perishing because they refuse to love the truth and to be saved. All he does really is create deception. And of course, I know deception is a bad thing, but if you read the text closely, it doesn't mention anywhere the use of war, killing. It just talks about the powers of deception. So there, I don't think the category fits with some sort of antichrist figure. Alright, the second possibility, the Roman Empire was the man of sin, or a certain emperor. You can understand why this would be the case, because they say that this is one of Paul's earliest letters, and in fact, in 40 AD, the Emperor Caligula did put up a statue of himself in Jerusalem and demanded that he be worshipped. And in fact, the Emperor Nero was this brutal tyrant who demanded worship. Um, and so you could understand why, um, when it talks about the man of sin, being revealed and he will sit in the temple of God, that if you took that quite literally, Caligula did put an image of himself in the temple, and Nero did demand worship. However, where that may get where that may cause a problem would be that verse I just shared before, which is, and in verse 8, and then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will destroy with the breath of his mouth, annihilating him by the manifestation of his coming. Now, again, his coming is talking about a future context. We know that as powerful as the Roman Empire was, it does not exist anymore. Would Paul be talking specifically about a individual emperor? And why would he relate that emperor to the end of the world? So that's one of the reasons why people take that theory apart. All right, theory number 3 is that the man of sin actually may refer to the Pope. That is one theory, that the papal power was the Antichrist. This was a theory that really developed in the Reformation Protestantism time, when the reformers said that the papal power was the Antichrist. I mean, we know that the Catholic Church was very corrupt at that time, and Martin Luther with the reformers really reformed it, and that's how the Protestant movement came along. But there are people, even now, who still maintain that the man of sin has to be the Pope, and that the papal power is still the Antichrist. I think one of the problems with that interpretation is that 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 4 says, he opposes and exalts himself above everything so-called God or object of worship. I know church history has not been perfect, and there have been times when the Catholic Church did not behave in a godly way, but I don't think we can say that they oppose God, because the evidence I see today is that the Catholic Church has very much bettered itself. I mean, I think the current popes are doing a very good job, and so to say that the man of sin is the Pope is almost the opposite to what the text is saying, because yes, we could say the Catholic Church fits the apostasy sequence of events, but just it doesn't say that the man of sin is a religious figure. It says that the man of sin opposes religion, opposes everything of God and worship to God. So it wouldn't quite make sense to say that the Pope is the man of sin, because he promotes Christianity, he believes in God, he believes in Jesus as Lord, whereas the man of sin doesn't do that. So it doesn't quite fit the narrative. All right, theory number 4 is that the man of sin is Satan, the actual devil himself, who causes trouble for the people of God. You could understand that interpretation. I mean, he was the one who caused Adam and Eve to sin. He is the one who stirs hatred and evil in the world. He was the one who worked in the lives of all these evil rulers in the Old Testament, causing problems for the people of God. So it makes perfect sense. However, that theory also falls apart in verse 9, where it says, the coming of the lawless one is apparent in the working of Satan, who uses all power, um, signs, lying wonders, and every kind of wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. It almost gives you the impression here that Satan works through the man of sin. Notice the words, the coming of the lawless one is apparent in the working of Satan. So I just wonder, is this man of sin more influenced by the devil than actually being the devil himself? All right, the 5th suggestion would be that the man of sin basically refers to a principle of lawlessness. The principle of lawlessness working in the world, in history, through evil people, evil movements, continues to be present in the world. We're basically dealing with the constant flow of lawlessness, which has happened from the dawn of time. It happened in Paul's time, and we see in our day that principle of lawlessness. These are the forces of lawlessness and the forces of evil in the world that oppose God, oppose the reign of Christ, and sets up human philosophies, basically human ideas that go against the way of God. And we come across a phrase in chapter 2 called the day of the Lord, and that's the context that we need to understand. Remember what Paul is trying to do. He wants to encourage the believers that the day of the Lord, the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, will be a moment of hope and great comfort. And he's trying to comfort them. He's using, obviously, language. We see here the phrase, the day of the Lord, is already here. That is language taken directly from passages like Isaiah 13 and 14, which mentions all these earthly kingdoms that come, Nebuchadnezzar and Syria, and also the king of the north in Daniel 7 all the way to Daniel 12. The basic principle that he's talking about is that the world keeps producing rulers who rebel and exalt themselves above God. And so you see, those Old Testament images of these earthly rulers wanting to proclaim themselves as God was something that was already happening within the Roman emperors, Caligula, Nero. And so this kind of thing was already happening in his day. So the basic lesson there that Paul is saying is that, look, this has happened in the past. It will always happen. And even today, really, you could say that it has not stopped happening. And he does have this expectation that history will repeat itself and history will be combined and it will manifest into this great rebel who will come in the future, and he will uh, bring violence upon people, create havoc for God's people, but that he will also establish himself as God in the temple of God. Now, we remember first of all that the temple is talking about the Christian church, so it's some person who is going to basically create problems for the Christian church of God. He's not using this text to fuel sort of apocalyptic, a futuristic apocalyptic language. Rather, this is a way of comforting the Christians in Thessalonica. Now, in knowing what we know so far about the way Paul wrote these letters, it could be that he was not thinking about any sort of future dictator person at all. Maybe he is just using the principle that wicked rulers come and go, and perhaps one day the world and the principles of lawlessness will manifest itself one day in bringing this great terrible ruler. It's hard to know. Would Paul have only had that image in his mind, or did he actually have the revelation from God that yes, there would be some future person who is called the man of sin who will come out of this great apostasy and lead God's people astray? Another important question to ask ourselves, it says that the man of sin or the lawless one will be revealed, but who's he going to be revealed to? I think the answer there has to be to the Christians, because the world, if people live in the world which promotes the lawlessness, the opposing God's nature, they won't recognize him as the man of sin. And so, really, the message there has to be that we Christians who do follow God, who do follow his law through the grace of Christ, will recognize him. There does seem to be a distinction there between those who won't recognize him and those who will recognize him. You see, that's the other problem with the Antichrist theory, is that says he will go into the temple and show himself that he is God and demand worship. In other words, he will reveal it himself, whereas actually the text is saying it's through the Christians that they will recognize this evil person and say, no, have nothing to do with that person. So it's completely opposite to what the futurists say. I mean, basically, at the end of the day, this is one of those chapters where Paul does not go into much detail. We would need more detail to find out the identity of this person, or is Paul using this as a concept of the principles of evil in the world? However, one thing we can take away from this Second Thessalonians passage, and that relates directly to the way we can live our lives today, is that Paul is telling them very clearly that the day of the Lord has not come yet. In other words, you are not living in the end times, because he says that certain signs will come when the end times, the leading up to it might not be obvious, but when the time comes, that will be obvious. And you see, we can relate that to ourselves right now. There is no way we can put signs, or there is no way we can identify certain points as evidence. Yes, we are definitely in the end times. The Lord is going to come right now. We can't say that about any period in history, and we certainly can't say it in the period in which we live now. So I think those words of Paul we can apply to any age on the earth.